This is My College Corner's Ask the Expert series. I'm your host, John Hupalo. Well, we're preparing for the college savings industry's big drum roll to May 29th. Numerically, that's 529. So 529 Day is a thing for the 529 industry, and we have the right guy to talk to us about 529s. It's not unusual for my guest to tweet at 529 in the evening or 529 in the morning for that matter, or to note that he paid $529 for an airfare to a 529 industry conference. Today's 529 data guru, Paul Curley, joins me in My College Corner. Paul, welcome to My College Corner.
Thank you, John, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I'm really glad that you're here. And Paul, you've been a friend of mine for a long time and a great friend of My College Corner and Invite Education. For those who don't know you, I should just give a little background. You are the director of 529 and Able Solutions at ISS Market Intelligence. You're a member of the Municipal Fund Securities Advisory Group. You created and are the editor-in-chief of the industry newsletter 529 Dash, and you run the 529 industry's largest and best attended conference every year. So no exaggeration, Paul, when we all know you are the go-to source for market data on 529 programs. Thanks for all you do for the industry.
Thank you, John, and thank you for your energy as well. I always watch your videos, and it gets good energy, especially with the FAFSA announcements or attempted announcements, and so it's great to follow you as well. Thank you.
Well, Paul, I learned something on LinkedIn the other day, which I thought was extremely impressive. And I'm not sure all your professional colleagues know this, but I myself, I was an Eagle Scout. So when I saw that you were involved with the publicity committee for Cub Scout Pack 100, I said, I've just got to ask you about that. We know you're a real family man. You spend a lot of time. Just tell us a little bit about what you do outside of work.
I go for a run every single morning, and of course that's why I'm able to get the 5:29 a.m. Post in the morning. Just eat well. I have a daughter who's now 12, and a son who's now 7, and so it's great, raising them. It's great, being there, and of course it's been nice to see the have two different beneficiaries, and just it's that side of the conversation is wonderful. It's great to live close near my family in Philadelphia. I'm born and raised in Massachusetts and New England, and now I'm down in Philadelphia area.
That's really special, Paul. Having beneficiaries, and actually, I think that personal experience really means a lot to a lot of us. We're passionate about this, and your personal experience is important as well. But let's kind of dive in a little bit to what we're talking about. And I thought that in the 529 Dash newsletter not too long ago, you wrote something that I really think kind of hit the nail on the head. And you said that 529s are no longer the ho-hum investing device for college. And let's peel back the onion on that a little bit. You've been in the industry for over 15 years. You have a lot of perspective on this. Take us back to around the days of the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. What were roughly the assets under management in these programs then, the number of accounts? What did the industry look like back then?
Yeah, but back then the assets as of the second quarter of 2010 were 117 billion, and since then it's almost to 500 billion in assets. So the assets continue to grow. There's a lot of market volatility, a lot of discussion around the short duration investment options such as money market, stable value, and FDIC insured, and of course there was a lot of conversations around those days. But since then, the number of accounts have continued to increase from 19 million back then all the way up to almost 16 million nowadays. So it's been a good ride. It's been growing quite well. And John, I got this book in 2016, so I know you know the history as well. And as anything, it's important to plan, save, succeed. Thank you, John.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Paul. But I think what you saw, that evolution, and it was 4 times or so growth in the assets under management. We had a big run up in the stock market then, but we've also seen a big increase in the number of accounts. Paul, what do you think drives those numbers? Why have we seen such a big increase over the last 15 years or so?
Probably that there's a couple different factors. One is just the awareness. So as people use it, people have been putting the money in, saving, using, and so as it's out longer and as there's more success stories of people saving and paying for education, that there's the natural loop. That being said, I think there is the broadening of the demographics, more people using it, more awareness, just more, broader set of demographics. And also the big story of the day is probably the broadening of the demographics, to apprenticeships, to all these different use cases. So as the use case broadens, so does the just usage overall, but also with more assets and accounts, that there's just more scale to make the technology enhancements to improve that ease of use. So it's nice to see, for example, there's been a number of plans that launch mobile apps to make it easy on that side of the coin as well. So there's a number of things working on the product marketing distribution side, but it's and I would also say there's a lot more opportunity to continue to grow. There's roughly 14-15% of families currently with a 529 plan, and so from that perspective, as much as the 529s continues to succeed, the opportunity for growth continues to be there.
It's interesting, Paul, the way you frame that. I think of it in terms of somewhat similarly, that there are program changes, and you and the College Savings Foundation and College Savings Plan Network with the National Association of State Treasurers done a lot of work, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, to broaden the use cases, if you will, for 529. So like you said, now you can use them for apprenticeships, you can use them for tuition payments on K through 12 programs. You can pay off up to $10,000 of student loans. I think that's all really spectacular. But last night I was watching Shark Tank, and sure enough, for Financial Literacy Month, one of the local TV stations ran a PSA about 529s. And the lead of that was not tax exempt. It wasn't any of the things that the industry talks about. The lead was Roth conversion. Do you think that's going to be a really significant movement or driver of future growth in the 529s? And maybe for our audience, just talk a little bit about what the Roth conversion is all about.
There's expanded capabilities with 529 plans in terms of just as we covered and John covered, for K through 12 and apprenticeships and student loan repayments. But now there's this newer provision that went into effect this year in terms of being able to distribute 529 assets over to Roth IRAs. There's 6 bullet points, and there's more to come in terms of the detail, like a 15-year holding period. But lo and behold, I think there's this great psychological impact and gain to be had in terms of like what if my child doesn't go to college, and it's like, well, for example, say they become disabled, now you can roll it over to able accounts. What if they go to trade schools? Well, now there's the apprenticeship piece. What if you think about all these different scenarios, and what if they just don't go to college at all? It's like all of a sudden it's like, well, you can roll it over to the Roth IRAs, so it could be, because no one saves enough for retirement. So it's so there's just all these added functionalities. But broadly speaking, the market data kind of points towards a use case of maybe 1% of accounts and assets being used for this purpose. So there really won't be too much drag on in terms of growth from that perspective. But I think there's again this fairly significant large material benefit to be had. All these parents, all these advisors, employers, all of a sudden like not having that hold back in terms of benefiting. There's a number of just sort of like media publications or advisors who say like I'm only a retirement specialist. Now with this additional capability, you have all these people who perhaps made the naysayers about 529s all of a sudden jumping on board, and there's been a lot of positive momentum, and with that more media, more push, more discussion, and more buzz. So that's good.
Yeah, it's all good. It's interesting the way you phrase that, because our mutual friend and colleague, Patricia Roberts, joined me in my college corner not too long ago. And I asked her what the biggest 520 myth was that needed to be busted. And she offered that it was that 529s are only for 4-year traditional schools. I said that I thought it was that a lot of families are under the misconception that if they have savings, 529 or any kind of college savings, that somehow they're going to lose out on a lot of financial aid. So you hear that, and I'm going to put that like in the excuse category, is why aren't you saving? Well, I heard that my friend said that maybe I won't qualify for financial aid. What do you think the biggest myth is that needs to be busted in 529s?
It's very interesting, John. We just fielded our annual survey of parents. We do it every single year. And so we're looking at all the open responses, and we ask people like why you are not saving, for those that aren't saving, like why. And one person's open response was, and this is still in the back of my mind, my child's only 7, so I don't need to start saving yet. So it's sort of like that my punchline being save early, save often, save automatically, because the downstream cost is so high that you can't wait until X number of days. I guess it also circles back to, you don't need a social security number yet to open up the account. So you can open up the account for yourself, wait until the beneficiary is born, and then transfer it over. From that side. But it's never too early, and it's never. I guess the point is that you shouldn't wait until a certain date or age to start saving. That it really is a little bit easier of a lift. I think an interesting story is that I presented once on the same panel with this Nobel laureate, and his big takeaway was, and I think he was based in Europe, and that there was this automatic saving account through the government for 2% saved, automatically, basically throughout one's life, to save for education. And so I think it's kind of interesting because there's just the scenarios are just just automatically, like, saving is just so critical and important to do over time. So
Yeah,
anyways.
no question. For Women's History Month, I had a chance to interview Treasurer Ma from California very quickly, and I asked her, "What is the one piece of advice that you'd offer, Treasurer?" And she said, "Paul, exactly what you said. Start early." Her parents are immigrants into this country. They saved. She and her brothers went through school. She has a fantastic story, and now she's the treasurer of the state of California. It's really pretty remarkable. But she said, "Start saving early." At my College Corner and Invite Education, we say that saving a dollar today is better than borrowing one tomorrow. We just love that phrase. And I think you said it really well. Looking back, Paul, well, let me say this. Looking back, we know what happened. Looking ahead is probably more important. If you can wave your magic wand, is there anything that you would do or that you would counsel your clients or the industry to do to sort of jumpstart the next level, get us to the next plateau for savings so that even more families can take advantage of these great benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably point towards the like a 2% automatic savings rates. I think that there's a lot of it's sort of like the mental hurdles, from the perspective of um just sort of commonizing the mentality of saving for education. That a lot of people have understood that, like, oh, I gotta save for with a 401k or 403b or to your retirement account. But to the extent of that pivoting towards the mentality of, like, oh, like, education is something that you need to save for over the long term. Because a lot of it's just I I think a lot of it is that there's a lot of opportunities to get people to save automatically over the long term. Like 1% of your of over an 18-year period does add up. And there's the credit card points is another great one. During COVID, we couldn't use the credit card points or the miles or the hotels, and so that I think there's different storyboards of being able to pivot the money from, say, daycare before they're 5 years old over to saving for college. So I think there's a lot of opportunities over the long run. But I think that from a magic wand perspective, I would say, like, just like changing the mentality, or perhaps the awareness, just working, with for example, all the great things you do, John, and you just get helping the Got Milk campaign, the 529 Got Milk campaign, as I like to call it.
Yeah, you've been an advocate of that for a long time. So, Paul, I'm just going to close up the 529 section with this question. When you're at the publicity committee at PAC 100 with the Cub Scouts and all, you have basically a peer user group. You're living this experience with a 7 and 12-year-old. Is there sort of recognition with your peers, your parent peers, that saving for college is important, or are they just too busy right now doing Cub Scout and other things?
Well, it's a great point. It's a great question. It is busy times, but it's a very top of mind topic. First and foremost, it's probably the number one topic for the parents, and of course, it's also the perhaps we need to rebrand from a college fund to a get off my couch fund. So it's so I say that very much tongue in cheek, but I do think it is kind of interesting, sometimes when they're playing and they're tackling each other. But it's I think it's all good fun on that side. But I do think it just makes it that much more important and interesting, frankly, to just start at that 1% automatic savings and increasing it 1% every year, or whenever one can. That way it's a lower lift, and there's all the gifts and parties, and I'd be remiss if we left the 529 session without me saying that the ability to pivot over gifts over to 529 contributions. It's never been easier to say return those Amazon gifts that you may not like from aunt so and so. You can return it. You don't even know that you returned it, and pivot that over to the 529 fund.
Yeah, I think the gifting platforms, you mentioned a bunch of drivers for success, but certainly the ease of use, the mobile apps, gifting platforms, everything the industry is doing to try to get the word out that 529s are really just not for college anymore, and it's just not for one child. And there are easy ways to begin to save. And no matter what you save, I always try to make this point to parent groups: no matter how much you save, at the end of the day, you can't be an optimist. You can't be a pessimist when you look back on it. You have to be a realist and say, this is how much we saved. And we did a great job. We did as best we could to save whatever we could. And that's going to reduce the cost of college, perhaps significantly reduce the amount of student loans that we have to take, and therefore increase that return on investment for a college student. So I think that's really all just absolutely fantastic. Let's move on. I love your title, Director of 529 and Able Solutions. Talk to us a little bit about Able, because in my mind, and tell me if I'm wrong, you track this day to day. I see it from conference to conference. But the able community is a strong one, but it's really at the infancy of, much like the 529 savings programs were in the 90s and the 2000s, kind of infancy of getting the word out and getting the benefits out. And there's always a lot of detail around government programs. But just talk to us a little bit about what the able programs are and how they are evolving.
That's a great question, and as it boils down quite simply to the fellow parents, it's a very easy conversation where the question does come up: what happens if my child becomes disabled, or I have two children, one has a 529 and one has an able account. So it's actually a very simple conversation and pivot point from that perspective. But the able accounts were born out of 529s. They saw the success of 529s as a model to borrow from and build off of. And so this year there's going to be the 10-year anniversary of the passage of able. From that perspective. That being said, that there was some time between the actual passage of the language and actual launching the plans. I think the first plan launched in the second quarter of 2016. So they're still growing. They're still growing in the infancy. The qualified expanses is much wider and much sooner, so that the success cycle happens much more frequently, because you can put the money in, save for a bit, and then use it. So there's much more quicker use cycles from that perspective. So we're seeing that the assets are growing, that people are using it, and that's a great thing. So
Across the country, I know able programs have come to be in different ways, but just a little bit, if you would. Are most of the able plans run by the same group that's running the 529 savings and prepaid programs, or is it entirely a different group? Is there a coordination, success sharing from one group to the other? How are they working to really get the able plans launched in a big way?
by and large, it's the same groups, same team, so they're able to knowledge share from one group to the next. Slightly different product structure, that a lot of the able programs are consortium models, so that there's a little bit more of a hub and spoke across the state. So there's there's roughly 45 able programs, but the vast majority of them are hub and spoke from in consortium models, which is interesting, and that does sort of really kind of interesting ways to the retirement space from a product structure perspective. But yeah, I do think that the able programs are quite interesting from that perspective, and a lot of the record keepers, the institutional players in both spaces do tend to be the same. That being said, on the state side, that they do tend to be different folks, different divisions. That being said, a lot of them do, for example, are underneath the treasurer umbrellas, like you had mentioned, Treasurer Ma. So
I'm very hopeful that these programs will start to take hold. At the recent College Savings Plan Network National Association of State Treasurers meeting, we had a chance to meet the woman who actually pushed the ADA legislation through. I think you were there for that. That was so special to see and hear those stories. You know, this is always about how these policies, public policies, impact families directly. And we're starting to see more and more of that in the student loan with the FAFSA fiasco, when we start to hear directly from families about this is changing the way I'm thinking about going to college. On the other side of the coin, with the ABLE programs, you're hearing directly from families, this is changing how I'm able to take care of my child or my loved one. And so it's really very special. And all of us, as I said at the top, are in this for some passion reason, sort of mission driven in a lot of ways. And the ABLE programs, I think, enable all of us to rally around something that is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, and for able accounts, the bigger transition coming soon is able age adjustment acts. So that typically in order to open up an account, your age of onset needs to be before the age of 26, and very soon it's going to be before the age of 45. So we're going to increase the number of account potential users from 8 million eligible users to roughly 15 or just over 15 million eligible users. So I think it's important. It's material, and it will change lives as well.
That's really spectacular that you brought that up, because when you think about the evolution of the 529 programs, started in the 90s, and then the big changes came in, I'll call it 2010 to 2020, with the expansion and the uses that we talked about now very recently with the Roth. I think what happens is that the policymakers like to see whether or not this is going to be successful, what their constituents are thinking about it, and then they add on. And so perhaps ABLE got a little boost from the success of the 529 programs, and we're already starting to see the next evolution of the ABLE programs. Thank you for bringing that up. Paul, I have one last sort of catch-all question, because you're so good at this. When we talk about ABLE, when we talk about 529s, is there anything coming on the horizon beyond what we just talked about with the ABLE programs? But is there anything that you see that we all ought to be focused on as we're thinking about helping these different constituencies? We're going to post a blog post at mycollegecorner.com about ABLE very soon. Do you have any advice as we're thinking about trying to help families understand how these programs can help them?
Yeah, I mean, I do think ultimately, as a boil down, for 529 and ABLE, there's probably two different documents I kind of point people to is obviously there's the IRS code that kind of provides the federal guidelines, but the plan disclosure statement, I do think that there's a lot of information out there for both programs, but obviously for ABLE accounts, there's probably much more so in terms of like pulling the plan disclosure statements to answer the questions, because that is the ruling guideline, for that land. Broadly speaking, for 529 plans, I think that the big catch-all piece is that it is broadening, from a demographics perspective and qualified expenses. We've seen that the 529 is going from just college to computers and textbooks to like room and board to K through 12 and apprenticeships and student loans to over to the ability to distribute over to Roth IRAs. And I think that the next broader piece is stackable credentials and all those different sort of educational components there. So it is a broadening, strengthening piece. And it's so I think on the 529 side, that's sort of like where the ball and puck is going on that side. For ABLE, there's the two big components. One is the ABLE Age Adjustment Act, and the scale, and that scale will help the plans become sustainable and stay open and just really solidify their permanency. While on the topic of permanency, there's all these temporary ABLE rules, such as the Able to Work Act and a couple other ones that were put in, as you said, as a temporary measures. There's the focus on making those permanent, and then from that perspective, one kind of final thought is that it is fairly straightforward, and to get your access up to those and your representatives up in the Hill on the 529 side. We've been of course, with between CSF and CSBN and all the different groups, have been able to champion the legislation on that side. But I think for on the able side, it's something where if you really believe and really confirm that you want certain things to really move forward, I think there's opportunities to meet your representatives in your state, but of course in DC as well. And they want to hear they want to hear what's going on in their state and their representatives, and I think that's an important element as well. So
Yeah,
there you
thank
go.
you. You've been all over social media, helping us understand the importance of using social media, storytelling, in all different facets of your work. Take a few minutes and give us a few shameless plugs, please. Tell us about 529 Dash, where people can follow you on social media, and then really importantly, I can't wait for your 529 day 2024 top trends in 529 enabled. Tell us about that and where we can reach you.
First two plugs. My College Corner. Follow John and all his great work in social media. Two, there's a great book out there. Plan and Finance Your Family's College Dreams. So please pick that one up. That's wrote by John. But yes, we do a lot of great work on our social media side. Our dash. The goal of 529 Dash was based off of feedback that, hey, Paul and John, can you just really help just get the message out there about the importance of education and financial planning. And so we launched a newsletter. I think we're on issue roughly 300. And so we do that, in terms of just getting the message out there. But also as well, we have a webinar coming up on 529 Day. So please join. We'll have Trisha Good from Ohio Tuition Trust Authority, OTTA, joining us on that one. So it's 529 Day this year is during the work week, so it's nice that we get to celebrate it. Last year was during the weekend and holiday, so this year we get to make sure it's live and appreciate all the work you do, John. But I would say follow John on social media. That does a lot of great work, a lot of great energy, especially around all the different fast moving pieces. So I follow you on that side and just appreciate all that you do.
Thank you. I always learn a lot when we talk. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today in my College Corner. Paul, anything else?
Save efficiently, save often, and plan, save, and succeed, which is what you wrote in 2016. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Paul, thank you. And that will do it for this edition of My College Corner's Ask the Expert with today's guest, Paul Curley, 529 Program Data Guru. We'll see you next time on My College Corner's Ask the Expert.